They thought they had wiped her kind from the galaxy. They called it a cleansing, a correction of nature's mistake. But nature doesn't make mistakes. It evolves. It adapts. It survives in silence long after empires collapse under their own arrogance. That's what she was now. Survival, wrapped in skin and memory. The ash in her lungs had the taste of betrayal. She hadn't spoken aloud in weeks. Language felt like a luxury now. Words had failed her people when they needed shield. Declarations didn't stop plasma rounds, and diplomacy had never been anything more than a lullaby sung before the slaughter. She kept her daughters close, the last. Not just of her family, of her species. Their skin glowed faintly under the firelight, a cursed beacon to anyone hunting. She taught them how to breathe without sound, how to sleep with one eye open, how to kill if it ever came to that. The galaxy had taught her brutality. She passed it on in measured doses, like poison used as medicine. The children didn't know the world that came before. They'd only seen craters where cities once stood, temples shattered and buried in mud. But in their dreams, she told them of rivers, music, and the feeling of sunlight that didn't burn. It was a memory she herself had almost forgotten, reshaped by war and exile. But it kept the fire inside her alive. They moved only when the moons were dark. Starships passed above like predators circling a carcass. Once, one landed nearby. Soldiers poured out in gleaming armor, machines sniffing the air. She buried her scent in mud and blood, pressed her children beneath roots, and carved silence into their bones. The soldiers left. One didn't. He'd seen her eyes from across the ridge and chose wrongly. She didn't enjoy the kill, but neither did she hesitate. Her blade was cold and fast. The body burned. The daughters never asked what happened. She never explained. They all understood the cost of existing. Resources were thin. Her kind had never needed much, but even the bare minimum became a scavenger's prize. She used old tech salvaged from forgotten war zones, rations sealed in faded languages, filters made for other atmospheres. Her body adapted. Theirs would too. Evolution wasn't pretty. It was cruel, slow, and driven by desperation. A transmission once broke through the static on a stolen comm, a voice, human, worn but clear. If any of you are still alive, find us. We don't forgive what they did. We remember. We'll fight. She didn't trust it. Not yet. But it lodged in her mind like a splinter. Not all humans had joined the purge. Some had defected, others had died trying to protect her kind. A few, like myths, still hunted those who led the extermination. Perhaps this voice belonged to one of them. Or perhaps it was bait. The galaxy never ran out of traps. Still, she marked the frequency. Replayed it on nights when the wind sounded like screams and the fire dimmed too quickly. One of the daughters asked her once, "Are we monsters, Mama?" She didn't answer right away. Monsters don't cry over their dead. Monsters don't whisper lullabies into ears still ringing from explosions. No, they weren't monsters. But the galaxy had turned them into something it would fear. That was enough. She trained every day, not for sport or vengeance, but preparation. The reckoning wasn't a dream. It was a calendar slowly filling with red. She didn't want war. But she'd become excellent at it. When you've lost everything, precision is all that's left. They stayed hidden, nested in the forgotten cracks of dead planets and ruins abandoned after the war. Sometimes she found old recordings, her people speaking, dancing, laughing. The children couldn't understand the language, but they watched in silence. A ritual of mourning, inherited without words. Once, she found the remains of a sanctuary. Not just stone and sigils, but memory etched into every wall. Her hands trembled touching it. It had been sacred once. It still was. She buried her weapons that night and knelt. Not to pray. To remember what it felt like to be more than hunted prey. But memory alone wasn't enough. She reforged her blade the next day. Sharper. Lighter. Deadlier. They hunted her kind like animals. Now, the last animal knew how to stalk back. She didn't fantasize about victory. Just balance. The kind born from blood and ash. Her daughters would walk free, even if she never would. Whispers began to reach her through broken channels. Rebellions, sabotage, disappearances. Ships vanishing in sectors once thought pacified. Ghosts, they said. Survivors, maybe. Or just one, her. She liked that idea. Let them fear shadows. Let them believe she was a phantom stitched from vengeance and flame. They called her species extinct. They should have checked for embers. She taught her daughters how to listen for lies, how to recognize desperation behind smiles. Trust no counsel, no fleet, no banner. Only action. Only loyalty forged in fire and protected with fury. Food became harder to find. The Empire sterilized whole regions just to trap her. But she slipped through like smoke. Where they closed borders, she tunneled under. Where they set traps, she turned them back. They underestimated what survival cost. She had paid it in full. She rarely dreamed. When she did, it was of a green world untouched by war, where her children ran without looking over their shoulders. She never saw herself in those dreams. That was the point. A drone once found their cave. Silent, almost clever. But not clever enough. It triggered too early. She disassembled the wreckage for parts and used the frame to trap heat from the fire. Efficient. Practical. Ruthless. Just like her now. Her daughters had names, though she never spoke them out loud. Names were dangerous. They could be traced, recorded, hunted. But she whispered them when they slept, pressing each syllable like a promise against the chill. She wasn't raising children. She was raising the end of the Empire. And when that end came, it would be quiet. Not a bang of defiance, but the slow unraveling of a lie too long believed, that they were gone. Extinct. Finished. No. They had just adapted. Evolved. Waited. The galaxy wouldn't see it coming. Not from the last mother huddled in a cave. But fire grows in darkness. And even the stars knew to fear what burned beneath the surface. She moved with calculation, never haste. Patience had kept her alive this long. Every step she took was measured, silent, leaving no trail. Her children followed, mirroring her without a word. They had become shadows, blue ghosts slipping between the cracks of a galaxy that had forgotten how to see them. There were rumors now. Whispers carried on encrypted frequencies, in the dead zones of the Empire's control. A rogue element, unpredictable. Commanders scolded officers for failures without understanding the enemy. She wasn't an army. She wasn't even a faction. She was something older. Something they couldn't program around. In the ruins of an orbital outpost, she found a working map. Outdated, but functional. The Empire's reach stretched farther than she remembered, its borders swollen with arrogance. But the interior was fraying. She saw it in the patterns. Interrupted patrol routes, delayed responses, civilian riot. Cracks in the armor. She marked key systems. Communication relays, supply chains, shipyards. She didn't need to bring the whole machine down. Just enough to stall it. Just enough to breathe. The Empire thrived on momentum. Break that, and it would begin to eat itself. The children no longer cried. Their silence wasn't fear anymore, it was instinct. When they spoke, it was with purpose. They asked questions about weak points, about engines and pressure systems. She answered all of them. Not because she wanted them to fight, but because she knew they would have to. She salvaged a beacon from a crashed drone and reprogrammed it to emit a false distress signal. A supply vessel responded, cautious but curious. She let them land, watched their protocols unfold, studied how quickly they dropped their guard when the terrain seemed empty. Then she struck. No blood, no fire, precision. She moved through them like a scalpel, disabling, disarming, disappearing. The ship was clean within minutes. She accessed its systems, downloaded charts, messages, schedules. Left it where it stood, empty, doors sealed. A warning without words. They would send hunters, of course. Specialists. Killers. But they still wouldn't understand what they were chasing. They still believed she wanted revenge. They were wrong. She wanted her children to see a future without uniforms, without orders barked in alien tongues, without fear baked into every decision. She built a base underground using forgotten tunnels beneath a decommissioned reactor. Radiation kept the sensors out. Inside, she layered insulation, power conduits, a growing archive of knowledge stolen one byte at a time. The Empire thought in weapons. She thought in infrastructure. Her body bore the marks of survival, old wounds, healed crooked. She trained harder than ever, not to become stronger, but to stay sharp. Mistakes now weren't punishments. They were extinction. One child asked, "Why don't we show them who we are?" She looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. Because truth is meaningless to those who kill what they don't understand. Still, the question lingered. She'd hidden for so long that identity had become a myth. Even among the resistance, she was a ghost. No species name. No history. Just a presence, felt and feared. She didn't need a flag. Her survival was the rebellion. She intercepted another signal. This one real, urgent. A colony under lockdown. Not her people. Civilians. Species neutral. Empire response. Lethal containment. She weighed the risk, the value. Then she moved. She left the children with instructions and took only what she needed. When she arrived, the streets were already scorched. Drone patrols floated through the smoke, executing anyone who moved. She entered from below, disabling their command hub and jamming communications. The drones faltered. Resistance fighters inside the city used the opening to strike. She didn't wait for gratitude. She took only data, names, coordinates, supply caches. As she left, someone tried to follow. She warned them once. They didn't listen. She made sure they wouldn't endanger her again. The Empire noticed. Their reports changed tone. They stopped calling her a dissident. They started using words like threat, contagion, anomaly. That meant fear. It meant they knew they couldn't control the narrative anymore. Her daughters practiced with tools that weren't meant for children. She watched, correcting their form, their aim. She wasn't proud. She was focused. Emotions didn't build futures. Preparation did. She created a virus, not biological, but digital. It crawled through the Empire's systems, subtle, slow. It flipped small numbers in supply orders, delayed messages by minutes, added errors into navigation logs. Enough to annoy. Enough to confuse. Not enough to trace. It was the beginning of erosion. She took no credit. In every channel, she was still nobody. Just fragments of sightings, trails gone cold, bodies found without explanation. The more they searched, the less they understood. They deployed psychic trackers. She fed them false memories, constructed pain layered over loss enough to drown them. Her kind had always been misunderstood. Too quiet. Too strange. Too unwilling to bend to imperial assimilation. So they'd been labeled dangerous. And what they couldn't control, they erased. But in doing so, they left a gap. And she filled it. On a mining moon, she stole an atmospheric processor and turned it into a forge. She began crafting drones of her own. Silent, self-repairing, coded to ignore standard scans. Recon only. Eyes in the dark. Her reach began to grow. The resistance began asking for her. Not by name. Just the idea of her. They whispered about the ghost who cracked systems and vanished. The one who burned supply lines with no trace. The one who killed without vengeance, only purpose. She found a file deep in the Imperial archives. Her species file, tagged extinct, marked with a red stripe. She stared at it for a long time. Then she changed its status to unknown. Active anomaly. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Her daughters found laughter again, if only briefly. They discovered an old music file in the ruins of a school. It played strange notes, clumsy harmonies, but they danced to it in the dust. She didn't stop them. She only stood watch. The war wasn't over. Not even close. But they were no longer hiding. They were moving, striking, spreading. They hadn't just survived the purge. They were shaping what came next. And she wasn't alone anymore. She was the beginning. The ember the Empire failed to crush. And fire, once free, spreads without asking permission. They called her a phantom now. Across Imperial frequencies, her name didn't exist, but her consequences did. Systems destabilized. Supplies lost. Loyalist strongholds found collapsed without explanation. They assigned task forces with unlimited resources and still failed. Their pride was a weakness she used like a blade. She infiltrated deeper this time. No sabotage. No violence. Just observation. She sat in the back of a council chamber on a contested world, cloaked, anonymous. The words were the same: calls for more firepower, tighter control, erasure of resistance. They still believed they were solving a problem. They didn't understand the infection had already spread through their core. Her daughters were no longer children. Their eyes were sharper, movements deliberate. They trained others now. Survivors, outcasts, those with no flags left to pledge to. Her methods had become gospel. Stay quiet. Strike only when it matters. Leave no legacy but consequences. In deep space, she hijacked a black site carrier carrying experimental weapons. She didn't destroy it. She reprogrammed its targeting system and let it return home. It fired once before it was shut down, on its own command station. Enough chaos to fracture protocol across half the sector. She returned to the planet of her birth. Nothing remained but glass and craters. Still, she dug. Beneath fused stone, she found the remnants of the archive core. She extracted what little survived: cultural records, language codices, songs. She rebuilt it piece by piece, not for sentiment, but to remind the universe that her people had existed, had created, had mattered. The Empire issued an ultimatum. Any system harboring enemies would be cleansed. Entire populations turned overnight. Civilians became fugitive. Trade routes dissolved. Pirates swelled. The spiral had begun. She didn't stop it. She accelerated it. The resistance expanded, uncoordinated but burning with purpose. What she began as survival became doctrine. No single banner, no shared anthem. Just intent. She didn't control them. She didn't want to. Movements led by symbols collapsed. Movements led by necessity endured. An Empire general tracked her. He was older, pragmatic, not blinded by revenge. He offered a truce. Sanctuary for her daughters. Amnesty. A place to rebuild. She didn't laugh. She didn't reply. She handed him a data drive instead. It contained footage of her people's execution chambers, overseen by his own insignia. He didn't return to his fleet. Her drones now operated across 7 systems. Silent. Watching. Transmitting flaws in Imperial logistics. One message leaked from a broken encryption line. The structure is sound. The foundation is gone. She gave the Resistance a new protocol: cellular cooperation. No centralized network. No dependency. Nodes of communication that could collapse without affecting others. A Hydra with no head. They adapted fast. Her methods spread like a plague designed to think. She used captured Imperial AI, reprogrammed it into a strategist. It argued at first. It wanted war in the old sense. Tactics, armies, declarations. She taught it silence. It learned. Its strategies became less human. More effective. Her daughters questioned her less now. They understood the weight of every choice. Not fear, but clarity. They weren't fighting to win. They were denying the enemy the ability to rule. Not destruction. Obsolescence. A major turning point arrived in the form of a failed harvest. The Empire had poured resources into war and neglected its population. When shortages hit, they blamed rebels. She distributed food instead, stolen from Imperial convoys, rerouted through forgotten ports. Civilians saw result. They stopped asking questions about the source. One Empire admiral defected. Not for morality. For survival. He brought schematics of orbital defense stations. She studied them, then leaked parts of it to factions she'd never met. Within days, 2 of the Empire's own satellites turned inward and erased a fleet from orbit. Still, she remained unseen. She didn't want fame. Visibility was a vulnerability. She taught this to every cell. Burn the image. Spread the idea. Let your enemies swing at ghosts. The Empire shifted tactics. Bioweapons. Precision strikes. Psychic interrogators. It didn't matter. She had prepared them all for that. Redundancy wasn't a fallback. It was the plan. For every base discovered, 5 more remained hidden. The core worlds began fracturing. Trade guilds refused imperial currency. Border systems stopped transmitting reports. Governors declared neutrality and quietly funded the resistance. The cracks had become fractures. Her daughters began forging alliances independently. Not with governments but with people. Smugglers. Tech scavengers. Old war veterans. The movement now had too many faces to track. She watched from a distance, knowing she would one day become obsolete to her own cause. That was the goal. She returned to a place once known as the Citadel. Now it was a ruin orbiting a dead star. There, she uploaded the complete history of her people into the galactic net, encrypted, scattered in pieces. Anyone curious enough could find it. She added no message. No explanation. Just truth. One of her drones reported that a planet had gone dark. No energy signatures, no transmissions. A cleansing. She reviewed the data and marked it. Not to respond emotionally, but to understand the pattern. They were desperate. That made them sloppy. She found one of the original scientists who had greenlit the extermination order. He was old, in hiding, protected by mercenaries. She didn't kill him. She sat him down and asked one question: why us? His answer was fear. Fear of unpredictability. Fear of difference. Fear of strength that didn't come with obedience. She uploaded his confession. The galaxy listened. The resistance didn't need instructions anymore. They were self-sustaining. Fragments of her approach lived in every new uprising. Not just military strikes. Ideas. Persistence. Memory. She returned to her daughters and told them the truth. The war would never truly end. But the shape of power was changing. The Empire would become something else, and they would shape what came after. She prepared one final protocol, a self-erasing archive that would activate when the Empire's central relay collapsed. It would remove all traces of her locations, identities, paths. Not to protect herself, but to ensure that no one tried to build statues. She was never meant to be remembered. Only emulated. In her last transmission to the Resistance Network, she spoke 4 words. Don't become what fell. The Empire collapsed not in fire, but in fragmentation. Its citizens stopped obeying. Its fleets refused orders. Its worlds redefined their allegiance not with declarations but with silence. The system cracked, and no one tried to fix it. She walked with her daughters across a quiet field, sky overhead untouched by satellite. They weren't hunted anymore. But they weren't free. Not yet. Freedom wasn't a state. It was a direction. And so they kept walking. Toward what was next. Toward whatever came after survival.